Yeah, it's interesting how if I guess what you could say is there's kind of feedbacks that happen here, like the improvement in transportation has been one of the things that has improved allocations. So you might ask, well, geez, should I attribute that to the transportation, or is there an independent effect of that on allocation? And I agree. But that's closely related to the following point. In general, you can't hardly think about any of these things in practice without some of the other ones. That is, you invent a new technology, well, you probably need some capital, because the old capital probably isn't going to work on that new technology, at least as is. And you're going to probably need some human capital because there can be some know-how associated with it. So these things, it's like production in general, right? When I write down y equals f of L and K, how much of that output was produced by labor and how much was produced by capital? Well, it's almost like a nonsensical question, right? You really can't say how much was produced by each. You could say how much would each get rewarded in a competitive market where they get paid their marginal products, but there's no sense to which you can say some of it was produced by capital, some of it was produced by labor. You could say, what could capital do without labor? You could ask, what could labor do without capital? Unfortunately, those two generally won't add up to the total, right? If there's some complementarity, which there usually would be, you would probably say, well, what do I do with the rest? I don't know how to allocate the rest between labor and capital. It's a joint product. Same is true of all this progress. There's a joint project. And all the decompositions we're going to do, when people decompose the growth, all depends on the path you took to get there. It's along the path who made the increments, right? Everybody understands that, right? Everybody understands? No? Let's assume the following. In order to get more output, I had to build a road and I had to build a vehicle. And if the road is always running ahead of the vehicle, then it'll look like the vehicle is the key factor, right? Because you see all this road and it doesn't do anything until the vehicle arrives. On the other hand, if the vehicle's out there and is waiting for the road, then you say, well, geez, the road is the key factor, right? So it always depends on who's running ahead of whom. When any time you're doing any kind of allocation, you can always allocate on the margin at that point in time based on who's scarce at the moment, but it doesn't really answer this question. It's just like you could say, I'm going to go from 0 labor and capital to this combination of labor and capital. And if I do it by allocating marginal production along this path, I'll get a different answer than if I go along that path, right? Because along this path, I'm going along a path where there's relatively abundant labor, so I'm going to always make the marginal product of capital higher than it would otherwise be. So I'm going to end up attributing a lot of it to capital if I go this way, and I'm going to end up attributing a lot to the labor if I go that way, right? Because that's like my sidewalk in the truck again, because in this case, labor is kind of acting like the sidewalk running out, the road running out in front of the truck. So it looks like the truck is the limiting factor, right? That's what I'm saying. Any of these decompositions, once you accumulate them, they all work well locally, but globally, the point is they all you never solve the complements problem. You never really solve what made the cake. Was it the flour? Was it the eggs? Was it, whatever. A cake is made by the combination of all those things, not by any one. You can ask on the margin, how much worse would the cake be if it had less egg or how less flour, but you can't say of the cake as a whole how much came from each. That's not, I don't even know if it's a well-defined question. I probably